This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the December 13th version of the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you, residing in the Brooklyn Holiday Bunker. It looks a lot like the regular Brooklyn Bunker, but I did hang a pretty wreath on the wall. I'm joined today by the usual crew. I don't know what kind of holiday spirits they're in, but we're about to find out. From the DRF offices in New York, we have Mike Hogan.
Hello, Pete.
And calling in remotely from Planet Texas, in a room with a lot of tone, is Jonathon Kinchen.
Yeah, you know, it's funny when you learn about your friends, like all of their pet peeves. Pete's pet peeve is audio in relation to shows. It really gets him fired up. There's certain things I hate. Hot water heaters that run out of hot water, things of that nature. But this is definitely Pete's thing.
I blame my father. For this from the time. No joke. I don't think I've ever told anybody this story, but I remember. I'm not even joking. I think I was in like third grade and recorded a little radio play with my friend and sometimes podcast listener Matt Blankman, a regular at Saratoga and often seen at Belmont Park as well, Matt Blankman. And we recorded some little radio, like faux radio show that second graders would do. And I remember playing it for my father, expecting him to be proud. And, you know, he was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But, you know, next time we could record it with my recorder and make it sound, you know, really great. So I think from the time I was a small child, I've had this idea that it can always sound better and you can always do better with editing. And sometimes that's a standard that I attempt to bring to the podcast. So now folks who are regular listeners are saying, Pete, how have you not leapt out a window with the way this podcast sounds half the time? And it's just, you know, it's like an out of sight, out of mind thing. I'll admit, I can't listen to the shows back because some of the stuff makes me so crazy sometimes. But that was in the old days. Now we're in the new days. We have actual audio professionals helping us out, putting this thing together. It's not just me and Mike with a tin can with a piece of string on either side of it, attempting to record acetates. And we're coming to you not only through the normal podcasting channels, but also doing the show live and coming to you live via Facebook Live, also Spreaker. So folks, check it out and get in on listening to live if you can. The normal schedule, this will be disrupted a little bit because of the holidays, but is Tuesday at 11 and Friday at 11. We'll give you a little bit of an update on the upcoming holiday schedule, but check us out live, or if you can't do that, you can get us via iTunes, through DRF.com, basically wherever you get your podcast, SoundCloud, and you can access us that way. The show is so much better with listener participation. We've got some listener participation coming up later. We got in some more great questions. If you have questions, you can hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Looms Boldly, Jonathon at UT Big Hair. Mike Hogan can be found at DRF Hogan, or you can email us podcast@drf.com, and you can get us your questions that way. So lots of ways to participate in the show. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about all kinds of fun things. Where should we begin? Why don't we begin with what was the big race of last weekend, at least in terms of next year's Triple Crown preparations. Mike, I believe you have an audio clip for us.
I do. Let's we'll take it up about halfway through the race, and I believe the track announcer is Mr. Bobby Nelson.
Just a half a mile to get there, 45-3. They picked it up that second quarter, and Mastery is going up to the outside of Bobby Abu Dhabi now to Poconos in front. Mastery, Bobby Abu Dhabi, not done yet, trying to battle back along the inside, and Longshot IRAP is a menacing presence just behind them third, and these three have come right together at the top of the stretch. Mastery's got a race on his hands now, but he's got a slight lead, and it's IRAP who's going to challenge from the outside. Bobby Abu Dhabi is left in their wake third. Late run from Dangerfield. Mastery having to work this afternoon. And Mike Smith going to work left-handed. And Mastery is responding. Mastery now moving away in the final furlong. Distance no problem for Mastery. He glides home a 5-length winner in the Futurity.
And there it is, Mastery, visually impressive out there at Los Alamitos. let me ask you, Jonathan, since you're the member of this phone call who has 100-1 future bet on Mastery for the Kentucky Derby next year. How are you feeling about that bet right now?
Yeah, it's cool to be alive. It's a little too early to tell. I don't think he really beat much in there. He was 1-5 for a reason. But he did it impressively. I mean, it's better than losing, or better than having an excuse not wanting to go long, or better than being ranked, or better than lots of things. Better than what happened to not this time, touch wood. So, yeah, I'm happy. It's good. It'll be fun moving forward, and hopefully things still continue to progress.
Mike, what are you thinking about Mastery at this point? I would imagine, I don't know if this will shorten his price in the Win Future book, but certainly the price isn't going to blow out after an effort like that.
Yeah, first I should correct myself. I said Bobby Nelson. It was Bobby Newman with the race call at Los Alamitos there. But yeah, Jonathan's right. If you're on him like Jonathan, there's no reason to be worried based on that effort. I think at the top of the stretch, it looked a little bit like he was in deep water, maybe kind of treading water a little bit. And then Mike Smith asked him, and he just kind of took off down the lane. I don't know if that was just a young horse being a little goofy or getting a little distracted and not focusing on business, and then re-braking, or what happened. But I think he's a good one, and I think he's clearly the best of Baffert's 2-year-olds, at least as far as what we've seen in the graded stakes so far this year.
Jonathan, do you agree with that assessment that you thought Mastery was in trouble there for a second at the top of the lane?
I mean, if you had a bet on you, or you got a little bit like for a second, but when he asked, he kicked away. So, I think that was just an example of Mike being pretty confident on a horse. It wasn't so much. And then, the blinkers back on and off and on and off thing kind of suggests, like Mike said, he might actually have some goofiness about him. So it's encouraging to think that Baffert will get the goofiness sorted out. And he's got a Hall of Famer like Mike Smith up to guide him the rest of the way.
What are we hearing about the Baffert barn? It seems like one of those operations where there's as the ones you've seen on the track, there's always another that he's even more excited about the long-term prospects on. Have you heard anything like that about the Baffert barn this winter, JK?
I actually did hear a friend of mine involved in the racing industry. I don't want to throw him under the bus. I mean, just because he's kind of a private dude. He said he heard that this isn't the best one Baffert has. I don't know if that's true or false. He didn't tell me who the other one was, and I don't know if he even knew who the other one was. He just said he heard Baffert's got one that he likes more than this one. So he better get started, or he's gonna have the Apollo curse to overcome.
What about was it maybe that one that debuted last weekend, American Anthem?
It could have been, because this comment came before that.
Yeah.
So it could have been.
Yeah, because that, I don't know if Pete, did you see that race?
I did not. I was going to say that Mastery earning a 91 Beyer speed figure this time out, improving from the previous effort. What sort of a figure did American Anthem get?
I think he got like a mid-80s, 80. I want to guess 86. I don't have it right in front of me, but it was a solid number, especially for a debut, and it was a race that could very well come back live. I think it was the favorite in that race might have been American Anthem, but there was a very close second choice who was actually second to Mastery in Mastery's debut. Pretty full field, pretty loaded field, and American Anthem broke a little slowly and was running down a loose leader, and he finally did get up in the final strides, but it wasn't like the race fell apart. He was really the only one that was running late, and he kind of did it all on talent. Looked like, at least to me, that's how it looked.
Cool. I'll definitely check out that tape, and obviously we'll be sharing any interesting whisperings we hear as we get closer to next year's Triple Crown Trail. Just taking a quick look at the prices. Mastery into 25-1 at the Win. I doubt these odds are updated from last weekend. It wouldn't surprise me to see that shorten maybe a little bit. Of course, these odds are basically based on what people bet as much as they are any sort of straight-up bookmaking. So we'll keep an eye on that price. One thing I do notice that I didn't see before, though, JK, according to the sheet from the Win I'm looking at, Mastery opened at 500-1. Did you not bet him before his first race? Where was the 500 for you?
Well, I think it was 500, but when you go to the window and you tell them you want to bet 250, they change the price on you.
That's quite a difference, but still, that's not some nice equity you have there. And
to be honest, in all honesty, it's just for the sake of radio. It's confusing to say this. Tell the story. When I bet, when I bet 250 on Not This Time, I think I got 150 at 100 and 100 at 90. They moved it on me a little bit.
That's typical. That's typical.
It's not that I was trying to blow smoke. I just didn't want. That was a long story to tell. Just easier to say 250 at 100. Like, who really cares?
Yeah. Especially when the bet's gone.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Not like you're bragging.
No.
Not like you're trying to make yourself look good. Well, it's gonna be an interesting. Obviously, it's a bummer to have lost Not This Time in the Triple Crown chase, but going to be a lot of interesting things that will become, for newer listeners, that'll become obviously very much the focus of the show as the calendar year turns. These winter shows are a little bit different. We have a little more time to talk about questions, to do things that are a little more theoretical. We're dying to have guests on, and we're going to be having a few guests in the coming weeks. Full truth be told, we were meant to have Garrett Skiba on today's show. Had a little bit of a glitch getting him, but I'm going to look to record an interview with Garrett that hopefully we can bring back on this Friday's show, so you won't miss out on that. Other news in tournament, Skiba, of course, one of the most accomplished tournament players this year, just having an amazing run. NHC Tour Chase is getting really tight. Last weekend there was some important activity. Rick Broth, who's currently second, had a near miss in an NHC qualify event on DRF tournaments. Cheryl McIntyre, current leader, went down to Monmouth Park with the idea of improving her score. She was unable to do so, so McIntyre currently holds a slim lead over Rick Broth. JK, you and I were poking around the standings the other day. You have any predictions about the NHC Tour at this point?
No, I mean, I would, look, online is the obvious place to think that there'll be movement. But a sneaky spot that I would keep an eye on, that if you're not planning this, then you don't really have a shot doing the tour if you're not paying attention. But Surfside, they got like 3 tournaments in a row, like 3 in a day. 3 separate tournaments in 3 days in a row. I would have my San Diego flight booked if I was in the chase at the moment.
Wouldn't surprise me at all to see a lot of the top names down there. Not the biggest fields, but I imagine even with the field size they're going to get, an outright win would be pretty helpful. We've also got Los Alamitos this weekend and a chance to see California Chrome run and play in a contest, $400 live bank event. If you're interested, SoCal has so many deep and talented field of players. I expect they'll get a decent field for that as well. Orlando Gutierrez is the man to contact. I believe larace@alamitos.com is the email. If I'm wrong about that, you can just look for him on the Los Al website and hopefully get a piece of that. Should be very interesting. It does look to me that despite the near miss last weekend, Broth is in a really good spot simply because the way the tour works, your top 6 scores are counted. And right now, his 6th and final score is still pretty low. There's more room for him to improve, I think, than there is for some of the other people up at the top. So keeping a very close eye on him. Super nice guy who I've had the pleasure of hanging out with at Saratoga and Keeneland. Very old school. Loves the physical daily racing form. I had a good conversation with him where he was begging me, as if I have the power to do such things, begging me that there could be, you could still get the old broadsheet. It wasn't a broadsheet, but the old larger format version of DRF. He loved it so much, he said he'd pay like $50 if we could just have a limited run. And he swore to me there were other people like him out there. And I thought I was a dinosaur just for printing out PPs, Mike. I mean, this is quite a longing from Mr. Broth.
Tell him to fly to Toronto. Don't they still have the big ones in Toronto?
They do, and he did tell me at some point. I think he is friends with Tommy Massis. He was having somebody FedEx him from Canada, so he was probably paying more than $50 when all was said and done. But I guess the problem with that is timing, right? Because the thing has to be, the physical paper has to be printed. You have to have your friend get a hold of it. You got to deal with the overnight. But I do believe he was doing that for a time, which is pretty crazy. Mike, you hear from horse players all the time. Is that a sentiment you hear much of, people longing for the old days? I like the comic book version myself. It's just a little bit easier to hold and flip through and negotiate. But what have you heard on that story?
Yeah, I don't talk to many of the players very directly, but I do hear, of course, Lonnie Goldfeder and Kathy Locke talk to a lot of them, and there are certainly players that they want to go back to the way the form was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It's what they're used to, and look, we're all bettors. Many of us are superstitious. And a lot of times the way you do something when you had a big score is how you do things going forward. You don't want to change things. Change is tough. It's hard to figure out how to do something new. And it's I think it's comforting for a lot of people to go back to something that they had and loved for years. The other thing I'll say is if you're at the track and it starts raining, the old one was a lot easier to use as a little makeshift umbrella too.
I started laughing early. I knew where you were going. I could see my younger self standing under a tree at Saratoga trying not to get hit by lightning with a racing form hat on. JK, you're well known for your ability to adapt as a horse player, always incorporating new things, taking the best of it, and continuing to just grow and get stronger. I think of you as a very computer-oriented player. I don't know if I've ever seen you at the track without your laptop. Did you learn to handicap just on the physical old school racing form, or were you always looking at some version of formula later?
No, I started DRF. That's just the form that I would grab at the track, and then I got attention hungry and tried Brisnet for a while, and I liked Brisnet and it was fine. But then I switched back. Probably like 3 years ago, I switched back to the form and then formulator, and then that's just kind of where I've been. Ever since. No coincidence that your huge run of success comes after you get into formulator. I just see it better. I can tell the story from a race better. You can give me like a different type of program. Give me anything, any other program, and I could probably use it. But I can tell a better story starting from the bottom of the form up if I'm looking at the DRF. Just because it's just my language. It just speaks to me better.
Makes sense. And I assume you don't use printed form for anything at this point. It's all computer.
No, if I got a day at the track I know is coming, I print and take it with me, and I have it because there's a lot of walking around. I'm moving around a lot. I'm going to other people's tables or rooms or whatever, and I hate carrying my laptop around. But when I'm doing my work, I like to have the paper and then use the computer, and I write my notes on my paper, and I only go back to the computer if I have to. But I typically am a paper guy. I've switched to a paper guy. The first NHC that I did well, I was a computer guy. I was all computer.
I was thinking a newspaper as opposed to, you're talking about computer printouts, I assume.
Computer printouts, yeah. I don't buy the form from the track.
It is interesting, all the different ways this is an interesting way where I feel like you've, for someone who's forward thinking, have gone backwards in a sense with the printing. But I agree, it's easier to just, for me, it just grounds my thoughts having that paper. And we've talked about this, Mike, and you make fun of me all the time for printing. And I get it, because it is a pain in the butt sometimes. But to me, there's no substitute for just having it all there at a glance. Don't have to turn on a screen. Don't have to do anything. For you, Mike, was it an easy transition to let go of paper and be screen only?
Somewhat, yeah. I just kind of did it cold turkey. Although, I also am a little spoiled because I can walk about 15 feet from my desk and grab a racing form to jot my notes on whenever I'm handicapping on screen. Of course, I don't, unless I grab one on Friday for Saturday. I don't have that luxury on the weekend. I'm at work. If I'm looking at races, or if I'm making notes even for the podcast form, jot notes on it that way. So I understand, it's better a lot of times to have physical paper that you can actually write on and circle and mark up and that sort of thing. But some of it is living in Oregon for 20 years where it's not reducing and not printing. It sort of just became my lifestyle, and I almost never print if I don't have to anything these days.
I get that. You've been culturally brainwashed by the Portlandians. That's a good an excuse.
It's true.
Let's talk one more thing about tournaments. We can't make all the official announcements yet. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but we're pretty sure there's going to be some sort of tournament-focused webinar next Thursday. Hopefully, and this is the unconfirmed part, but hopefully it's going to also double as our late week podcast, our sort of last podcast before the Christmas holiday, where we're going to be talking a bit about the opening day races at Santa Anita. But there's some moving parts that need to fall into place before we do that. But just keep in mind, next Thursday, potentially a webinar that will connect to a special contest using the DRF Tournaments platform. Be on the lookout. Can't say any more than that now, but be on the lookout. It could be something really cool for folks to attend and then later have the opportunity to play in a contest and maybe get a little bit of a free roll if everything breaks the way that we want it to. Mike, what is the plan for webinars in general coming up end of this year, beginning of next year? What can folks look forward to?
Well, after the new year, we're going to start up the regular. It was every other week is generally when we had them scheduled. And then sometimes we would have special ones depending upon events and races and just how the calendar fell. Starting after the first of the year, expect Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, at least every other week for there to be some sort of webinar on how to use Formulator. I want to get a lot more guests involved. I want to do more of these Formulator player roundtables. I want to get people to come in and talk about wagering strategy and using Ticket Maker. And I see it as this webinar and more like an education series, almost like a class series that would happen every couple weeks at least.
That sounds cool. And I think, we were talking before about audience participation in terms of asking questions for the show. Well, I say we put out a call to listeners. We've got some pretty sharp people who listen to the show. If you happen to, you don't even have to hit the bet, but if you happen to come up with an idea for a play that can demonstrate the way that you use Formulator, any feature of it, whether it's the notes, whether it's the charts, something having to do with the replay, something having to do with the way you customize your PPs that made a winner leap out at you, go ahead and let us know and maybe save a screenshot of what you saw, and perhaps we could invite you to one of those player roundtables. I'll also say to folks that it's not a bad idea to let us know what you want to see. Is there some aspect of Formulator or some other aspect of horse playing in general that you feel like we could treat, not necessarily on the podcast, but maybe even to do a whole webinar about betting strategy for a particular wager or something more specific to have to do with contest strategy? Between the three of us, we can probably answer most of the questions you have, at least in some way, shape, or form. So that's something that I encourage folks to do. That email again, podcast@drf.com. Mike, just looking over the drf.com website right now, looks like we got some interesting news happening here. I don't know if you're up on all the news of the day. Anything in particular you felt like taking a swing at here for the show?
Well, we talked a little bit about Mastery. The race the other grade one we didn't talk about over the weekend was the Starlet, where Abel Tasman ran down American Gal 8, keeping Bob Baffert from taking down both of the grade ones. And after the race, trainer Simon Callahan, trainer of Abel Tasman, came out and told our Steve Anderson that he's basically going to back off and give Abel Tasman a rest and probably not bring her back until I think the grade 1 Santa Anita Oaks in April, as one single prep for the Kentucky Oaks, which of course is the day before the Derby. So just wanted to discuss, what do you guys think about that?
Certainly unusual, very unusual. I mean, horse training, we talk about people evolving as horse players. Trainers are also always evolving. And you've seen this. The first example that comes to mind from Simon Callahan's native land in steeplechase racing, sticks racing, national hunt racing, whatever you want to call it, where they go over the obstacles in the winter. And the way that the training has evolved in the last 10 years, crazy. There was a horse when I was first getting into it over there named Best Mate. And Best Mate, people sort of rolled their eyes at the campaigns he'd have. He ended up being a 3-time Cheltenham Gold Cup winner and a horse who I really fell in love with. But his trainer, Henrietta Knight, would run him these like super abbreviated campaigns with sort of similar, like one prep for a big race, and maybe in the year, I wish I had the PP in front of me, but I feel like he'd run maybe 4 times. And other people sort of, you hear people rolling their eyes about it. I'll tell you what, over the course of the next 10 years, that has become much more the norm in that kind of racing. Now, it always made a little bit more sense to me that, horses may be running 3 miles through super soft ground, the sort of effort it took, maybe they did really need that long to recover. But, I mean, I could at least conjure an argument that the demands, the attrition of dirt racing, that it's not crazy to me. I mean, it's weird, and I'm sure a lot of horsemen are here are rolling their eyes, but at the same time, I'm not somebody who, I try not to be that guy just having knee-jerk reactions to people doing things that are weird, because we see the way in other sports how adopting new techniques and new ideas can really transform things. So I'm like cautiously skeptical, but I'm not, it's completely nuts. What do you think, JK?
No, I'm that guy.
You're the completely nuts guy?
Yeah, I'm also the guy that they could run that race again. I'm not using that horse. So. Look, it's like one of those situations where, and this might be a bad example, but when I first started gambling in like college, me and my friends, we thought we knew what we were doing, but we didn't really know what we were doing. So then we had this brilliant idea that we were going to just play a bunch of 16 parlays, $5 16 parlays. We're going to hit one of them, right? It's just like this brilliant idea that we thought we were smarter than ourselves and smarter than the rest of the world. And to me, that's what it feels like. I mean, it's like, why not? Why? Like, why? Like, I don't understand that.
That's a great question. Was there any more sort of discussion of the specifics of it, Mike, in the interview, or was it really just like, this is what we're doing? I'll
read the full it's like 2 paragraphs about that race, because it also talks about Baffert's plan for mastery, and we talked a little bit about how it looked like he was not responding, and then Mike shook him up a bit and he took off. That's Baffert's quote. But then it goes on to say trainer Simon Callahan is taking a more conservative approach with Abel Tasman, the upset winner of Saturday's Starlet Stakes. Callahan said on Sunday that Abel Tasman is unlikely to race again until the $400,000 Santa Anita Oaks on April 8th. His main goal for the spring is the $1 million Kentucky Oaks at Churchill Downs on April 5th. Here's the quote. I think we'll be patient and bring her back for the Santa Anita Oaks, he said. I think she'll get better, and if we're patient now, she'll reward us. Hopefully we'll have her in May and at the end of the year.
So not really a whole lot of why. I mean, though there is to me like a little bit between the lines, maybe having to do something with the way she is physically. And we do talk about
perhaps.
They call 2-year-old races baby races for a reason. And I could see, depending on, like a bigger framed horse, maybe just needing has enough precocity to win anyway. Now, I'm just kind of talking out of my hat here. I've clapped eyes on the filly. But you could see a certain type of horse for whom a more patient training schedule would have benefits. So that's a little bit what I'm getting out of that. Also, just want to point out, we're quoting from a DRF Plus article. Lots of great information, and if you're serious about getting good at this game, you want to get a DRF Plus subscription and read everything all the terrific DRF team of reporters from coast to coast have to say day in, day out. But we'll giving a little bit of a preview here. JK, let's talk a little more specifically about this. Is this your cynicism on this? What is it based on?
Well, I mean, if you look at the form, right? The horse debuts, gets beat 11 lengths, runs 5th, then comes back, second off of a break, second time and wins. Then the horse runs, fresh and runs okay, but then wins a grade 1 second off a break. So you're winning grade 1 second off a break. Do they feel like this is enough? They're going to get enough points to get into the Oaks just off the Starlet win, so they're trying to duplicate that. They'll just prep in the Santa Anita Oaks and then run in the Oaks itself. Why not run her in the Santa whatever it is, Yanez, or just run? I just don't get it. And I'm not running to the window to bet horses. I don't run to the window to bet horses. Never mind.
You gave out your pick 4 ticket for Saturday, Jonathan. Obviously, you can hear it a little bit in your voice too. A little bit of a sore point. The result of this race, is that factoring into your opinion about the future at all here?
Yeah, no. I mean, like we talked before, Pete. Like we've had this conversation. We actually had it the other day, and it might be actually a good transition into a topic. But I don't like being wrong. I hate losing when senseless horses beat me. Like horses that I can't have. I hate that. When it's horses that, I don't mind seeing the ball go through the hoop. I like seeing if I thought a horse could win and I didn't use the horse and he beat me, I'm okay with that because there's a reason why I didn't use the horse, right? There's a reason. I had a reason in my mind why I did not use the horse, and I believe in the reason that I had. It's these situations that drive me crazy when they could run the race again, and knowing what I know now, I still wouldn't use the horse. Those are the losses that burn me a little bit.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I've been meaning to talk about it because I think it's such an interesting difference in our mentalities, and I don't know what it says about you, and I don't know what it says about me. But for me, I would rather – the exact example that came up was it was some pick 4 or something that we maybe even had played together, and we were out of it early, and then everything – but in like a horrible, unlucky way. And then it came to the last leg, and – let's just say we had 3 horses in the 4th leg. I was rooting against them. I didn't want to see them win. I wanted it to be some random horse that I never would have had won, so I wouldn't have to second guess the tough beat that we had in the first leg. And you were the exact opposite. You used the exact same phrase. You said, I want to see the ball go through the hoop. You just wanted to be right about the last leg anyway. Am I characterizing your opinion correctly?
Yeah, 100%. Like that's the way. That's the way I like. I prefer it that way. I like to see the ball go through the hoop. I like to know that I'm seeing the game right. I like to know that if like I said, if I get beat by a horse that I decided to toss, that made sense to me, but I made a decision to toss him, I'm better with that because that means I'm seeing it right. I'm seeing the game correctly. When there's a horse like this horse that I wouldn't have ever used beats me, it's much more frustrating because it means I'm not seeing it correctly, or there's an aspect of the game that I have yet to figure out, and that part is more frustrating than getting beat by a horse that I liked.
I just accept that there's always going to be whatever it is, 20% maybe not that high, but right around there, of race results that just make no sense to me, that there's just enough chaos inherent in the game that that there's almost nothing to figure out, and you could look at it forever and not figure it out. So I don't worry about that part. I want to sharpen my focus on the 80% of the game that I feel like I can understand. Mike Hogan, where do you stand on this issue? Using specifically the example of that pick 4, you were unluckily knocked out early. Now it's the last league. You'd originally played 3 runners. You're not making a new bet in the race. Do you want to see one of those horses win, or do you want to see a goofy outsider?
Yeah, I'm generally with you, Peter. Or at least my gut reaction is I don't want to have my ticket lose by a nose in one of the legs, but then be absolutely right in the other, because it's just so frustrating for me to be that close but not just to come away with nothing. But I do end up taking solace, or at least that's how I try and move on from it, in taking solace in the way Jonathan looks at it, which is, hey, well, at least I'm seeing the ball right. I understand why, I might have had a winning horse in whatever leg who didn't win, maybe ran a winning race but didn't quite win for whatever reason. it makes me feel at least good about how I handicapped and approached the bet, even if I came away a loser.
Don't get me wrong. I think Jonathan's attitude is probably way more healthy than mine. It seems a little bit pathological to sit there rooting against yourself, essentially, in the last leg. But it's just it's a very human aspect of my horse playing that I haven't been able to really get over. I'm curious, other folks out there, whether you're listening live and want to let us know what you do in that situation or what you think in that situation, feel free to shout at us. We might have a couple of minutes at the end of the show today to answer any questions that live listeners have as well. So feel free to take a look at that tool within Spreaker, if that's how you, and let us know. Maybe Mike Hogan, if you have a chance at some point while we're yapping about these listener questions we're about to tackle, to see if anybody has any buy-in there. Can also, of course, hit us up on Twitter as well, and we'll get to you later or on a future show. But I do have a few questions. Maybe we'll transition to those. The first one is a tournament question. We'll start with that. I was asked last night, and this is an idea I've mentioned before. So, Jonathan, I'll have you answer it first, and then Mike, as sort of an outside perspective, have you talk about it. The idea is that you might have a contest, an all-in contest, where all the picks have to be in before the first race. But instead of final, you use the morning line as a guide. And even if the horse is 6-1 and ends up going off at 4-1, for this contest, you'd get the 6-1. Now, let's put aside the logistical problems of doing this and whether or not the technology could work on DRF tournaments to do it, because I don't think it is set up to do it. But just in theory, we'll let you guys give your takes, and then I'll say why I kind of like this idea in a certain sense anyway. JK, what do you think of that plan?
It's kind of a cool idea, to be honest. I've never heard the thought before, so I've had 17 seconds to think about it.
That's good. We like gut reactions on this.
I like it because I feel like I would have an advantage. I feel like people that play a lot have a better feel for where your odds are going to go. And I think if you can play the game where there's a bad morning line of a 5-1 horse, and the horse is going 5-2, then obviously it's more of a strategy game in that regard. The part I don't like about it is that I prefer tournaments that I play in, although I know they get lost at times. I prefer the basic values and basic ideas and methodologies involved in racing and handicapping and betting stay involved. And what they break at the gate, what price they break at from the gate is the price. And so, I mean, look, I think it's interesting. I would play in it. I think it's a fun idea. I'm not sure if it's like something that's going to solve some of the tournament issues that we might have.
Just to follow up real quickly, Mike, before we get your take on it, what I like about it is if you're looking at these contests as handicapping contests, which of course is what they're called and theoretically what they are, to me you can't have handicapping divorced from odds. In other words, that's the sort of art of it is assessing a horse's chance of winning based upon the reward you're going to get for that horse. And that's sort of my issue with the all-in format. There's things I get about it. To me, it's a pure picking contest. It's not a handicapping contest. I suppose you could make an argument you're handicapping not only what you think the chances are, but also what the crowd is going to bet. That's a bridge too far for me. It's just not something that I find personally that interesting. This solution, just for me selfishly as a player, I think there's something to it. Mike, does it appeal to you? Which of the two formats appeals to you more as somebody who's fairly new to tournaments?
So, yeah, and I'll preface this by saying, look, I don't really play many tournaments. I do play the all-in. I haven't played in a little while, but I do play the Friday contest that we have at DRF where some of the employees do an all-in version prior to about a half hour before the first race for a certain card. So I get the format. I understand how it works. I don't play it a whole lot, but I'll just say this. I hate the idea. I hate the idea.
Why is that?
I see no reason why one person's opinion that's done 2 or 3 days prior to the races, before weather, before scratches, before anything else, should be such a huge hinge on the outcome of a contest. And the way I would see it is, and I see it all the time, I see a 10-1 morning line horse that I look at it and I say, there's no way that this horse is 10-1. If I got 10-1, I'd absolutely be playing this horse in the contest, but this horse is going to be 4-1 at best. So you factor that in and you move on. You know, some of these morning lines, you see the Bob Baffert 5-2 coming off of a second in the debut. You know that horse is going to be 4-5. You know, you just know it as a player, you know it as a handicapper. And so to get this artificial number that some random person at some track somewhere assigned just seems wrong to me. And you're going to end up, I would imagine, with way too many players that are taking that horse because they know they're going to get an overlay compared to the actual. But isn't that the essence
of a handicapping contest, rewarding the people who know what the overlays are? Isn't that exactly what handicapping is? I feel like that's a deserved edge.
There's other ways to do that. You're gonna have 90%, maybe that's a little high, but maybe 80% in some races with a 5-2 shot that everyone knows is going to be going off at even money.
Right, but I mean, in so many handicapping contest situations, even that 5-2 isn't enough to tip the scales. You know, that's Jonathan. You've had another bit of a chance to think about this. Mike makes an interesting case I hadn't really thought of. Is it swaying you at all? Is your opinion evolving on this at all?
Yeah, like I said before, I'm cool with people trying new stuff, but after I thought about it more, I'm leaning more towards Mike. I kind of hate it a little bit. I mean.
There are other ways to get at, I think, what is trying to be accomplished here. And, there's ways to do it aside from morning line. Because, look, I'm not going to name names. I'm not even going to name tracks. But that there are some tracks where the morning line is much more spot on than at others. And even at tracks where the morning line maker is really, really good, sometimes they just completely miss it on a certain horse that might be a buzz horse or might be a shipper or something like that. I don't to create a whole contest based on that seems just so false in a way, because it is not really any true sense of value. It's one person's estimation of what value might be. So to get at making it more of a handicapping contest, why not do something like you're eliminated if you have in an 8-race sequence more than 3 horses that don't hit the board or something like that. Come up with some sort of other way to keep it so that people aren't just picking every 20-1 shot that has no chance of winning and hoping that they hit out 1 or 2, and maybe that's enough to get them through.
Well, I think the all-in format already does that. I don't think people are just picking 20-1s hoping to get one through. Have you ever seen that strategy applied?
I don't know. Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I see ones that I would never make a case for, or would have a hard time making a case for, that end up, running second and at $45 or whatever the DRF one doesn't have a cap, so maybe the cap is what ends up helping.
To clarify, the DRF office pool doesn't have a
right. Exactly, you're right. Sorry, the DRF office pool pays out to win, place, and show, and there's no cap, and so sometimes I've
that
lost
does
out.
Change things. Yeah, that does change. In that format, you're probably better off doing what you said. In truth, it's a good question. I mean, the great thing about this is there's a lot of different formats, and no matter what your personality is as a tournament player, you can find one you like. I like this one and would play in it. You guys obviously don't. I don't think in the real world we're going to see it unless somebody were to set it up almost as a private office pool type game. I think there are technological limitations. There are some impractical things like races that are oversubscribed and also eligibles and things like this. I guess really what the more we talk about it, the more I realize is I just as a player, I see why they exist. I get why people like them. But for me as a player, I just don't like contests where all the picks have to be in before the first race. When there's no odds to me, it isn't handicapping. It's a pure picking contest. That's fine. It's just not for me. And I think that a lot of people who have problems with different contest formats need to realize that if it's not for you, you you move on to one that is for you. Does that sound about right, Jonathan?
100%. Yeah, I mean, if you don't like it, don't play in it. Like you said, there's a place. Yeah, there's a place for it, though.
There is something, not necessarily the specifics of what Mike said, but I do think at some point it might be fun on the podcast to have a contest along the lines of one, Jonathan, that you had described, where you pick, what was it? It was for the Breeders' Cup, and you were picking a winner, but also a horse that couldn't hit the board. Was that the format?
Couldn't hit the exacta.
Couldn't hit the exacta. That might be a fun, like, little round robin contest for us to do. I think of bringing in somebody like Chris Larmy, or Brent Sumja, both of whom have participated in contests with us before, and running that bring it back in some form, whether it's to look at a weekend of public handicapper races or a big day like a Kentucky Derby day. That might be a fun thing to replicate at some point on the podcast, just between ourselves. Would you guys be up for something like that?
Yeah, I love it.
For sure. And speaking of public handicapper, I think we all deserve a little pat on the back for a winner this weekend at Fairgrounds.
Oh, that's right. You guys talked me onto the horse. This was the horse. What was the name of the horse?
Hail to the Nile, I think. Right?
Hail to the Nile, who I was like on the fence leaning away from, and you two talked me into it. So hopefully, if my bullhead was able to accept 9-2 as a good price on this horse, several listeners were as well. As I say all the time, you can't stop rock and roll, and you can't stop the DRF Players podcast. Great job, guys, on that one.
Yeah, blind squirrel nut. Sometimes it happens.
How do we do at the rest of Fairgrounds? Do we cover ourselves in glory throughout the whole day, or was this the lone moment of triumph?
I think there was a big long shot that, or maybe not a big long shot, but somewhat of a price horse that ended up beating out other horses that ran second and third that we liked. It's not like our horses didn't run at all, but I don't think we had any other winners.
Yeah, I was not playing very actively, running around. The Christmas preparations have begun. The tree is up in the living room, and there was a lot of that going on, and Army-Navy game and all this stuff. It was a rare weekend where I was not completely nose to the grindstone on horse racing, and hopefully there won't be too many of those coming up in the near future. We do have a couple of other questions I wanted to get to before we sign off here today. This first one, Jonathan, I feel like you're going to be the one to answer this question. It's a guy who's putting together a bachelor party for a friend who lives in Saratoga, and he was thinking about trying to do a bachelor party at the Kentucky Derby. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know why you think that this one would work for me.
You go to the Derby every year.
Oh, okay. I thought it was more about me knowing how to party.
Well, that too.
Oddly enough, a group of friends from Austin that I'm not extremely close with, but acquaintance with, they did this last year, and so they called me and my friend Robert for some input on what to do. First thing is, don't do hotels. It's crazy expensive. Tell the guys to not be cheap and find a big house and rent a house. And if you're going to do the bachelor life thing, then just kind of couch it up, air mattress it up. That's going to be the best bang for your buck. You can walk to the track. You want to try to avoid cars because you got 7, 8, 9, 10 guys. It's going to be trouble. It's not an easy place to park in, get out of. It's a nightmare. You're going to be walking everywhere. So rent a house. It just depends. If you're a handicapper, you're going to be annoyed. But the easiest way is just to do the infield thing, but you don't get to really see anything. So it kind of sucks a little bit. What I would do is try to get a couple of boxes, whether it's in the first turn. If you guys are balling on a budget a little bit, you can try to get something like a box on like the third floor. That's the best place to be able to watch the races from. And the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. Just enjoy yourselves. But yeah, the biggest thing I would do was get a house. The other trick, if you're on a budget, is fly into, not so much Lexington because it's still expensive, but fly into Nashville, Cincy, or Indianapolis, and you're 2 hour drive-ish away from there. We did that a lot of times. We just get get a rental car from Nashville. We fly into Nashville. We drive the rental car. We park it for an entire weekend. Never drove it again. Then drove it back to the airport when we left on Sunday. So that would be my advice.
Have you ever done an Uber from Louisville to Cincinnati? I wonder what that would cost.
I have. I've Ubered from Lexington to Louisville, which is like an hour. So that was like $75. I've done it from Cincinnati to Lexington, which is like $75. And I would assume that Louisville to Cincinnati being about an hour is about the same. $75, $80, whatever.
Yeah, and you also have the option of staying. If you're going to commit to Uber, you have the option of staying. I mean, I get that your idea, Jonathan, of like walk to the track and whatnot. But like if you were flying into Cincinnati, you could probably find, somewhere in LaGrange, Kentucky, to stay for way cheaper, even if you're renting a house. I don't know if they have Airbnb in LaGrange, Kentucky, but they probably do. And, cut some serious money off your deal that way and still get everywhere via Uber. Another thing I'd say, my advice, and tell me what you think of this, because you're more hardcore than I am, but for me, I would not want to do the 2 full days at the track just because of that time between races. For me, it just grinds me out. I would probably commit to just doing the stakes portions of the cards on each day. Does that sound like good or bad advice to you?
I think it's great advice. To be honest, any other day, Pete knows me well enough to know that if I'm going to the track on a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Saturday, or whatever, I want to be there for the first. I like to get there for the first. I like to get there early, whatever. Derby and Oaks, completely tossed out the window. Our friend Jack Jenkins, I'm sure he's listening. He'll tweet about this. He was really mad at me one day. I convinced him to come from Tennessee to come to Oaks. Come on. So he comes. He shows up for the first, and I didn't show up until like the 6th because I don't come until the stakes. I don't go on Derby Day; it's too long. I just show up for the stakes. And historically, like I said before, and I've told the story, the best bet I've ever made in my life, that $300 cold pick 3, I was running into the track for the Pat Day Mile and hit my cold pick 3 that day, like literally arriving at the track for the Pat Day Mile.
You're like Mike Smith.
Big races only.
You only show up on the big races. You don't bother with claimers. You don't bother with maidens unless it's a really special horse.
I must point out this is Derby only for Jonathan. I've seen him bet mule racing out in California. When he says as long as they're running in a circle, I'll have at least a little something on, he ain't kidding. But it is interesting that he breaks out special rules. And, transportation, who needs Uber when you can just have your stacks of bills with rubber bands around them riding a golf cart home after the races, JK?
It's one of the greatest days of my life. I just wish I could duplicate it. It was so much fun. We got, our first driver stiffed us. The first driver we gave $100 to, he stopped us at this little like corner party, like a little block party they had back in the neighborhood. So we were all enjoying beverages, and we look up, and he's wheeling away after we'd already given him $100. Oh. Who cares at that point? We just gave it. We found another guy, gave him $100. He took us all the way to the spot. Worked out perfectly.
I love it. All right, let's talk for a minute about this last question. JK, you might have something to say about this, but I think it's a little bit more for me and Mike, because it's a job advice, somebody looking to potentially get involved in horse racing. Now, we only have about 5 minutes to answer. You could actually do a show on this. Mike, I'll let you start while I gather my thoughts on advice you would have for somebody looking to get involved in racing.
Well, I would say, look, do what you do, whatever it is you do, whether it's sales, marketing, reporting, whatever it is you do that, and then find a way to work that into horse racing. Because there's a lot of people that say, look, I like horses, I like to handicap, give me a job, but you need to find something that differentiates you from everybody else. What's the edge that you have that you can bring that 95% or 99% or 99.999% of the other people don't have? Focus on that, and then make that better. Make yourself essentially more marketable to a company in racing, and then just put together some samples of your work, or connect and meet people, and if you're persistent and you're good, the doors will open.
Connect is a key word there, Mike, I think.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, I think you are as good as anybody to we can break out one of Jonathan's greatest hits in this response, possibly, when you talk about the connections you can make in horse racing, specifically through the contest world, actually, and how they can lead to some professional opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said before, when I started playing tournaments, I had one friend in racing, and now I've got like 200. And part of it is just randomly putting yourself in positions where you get to meet people, just there's so many random cool things I've got to do, and it's all been just because of me being put in the right position at the right time, because I kind of put myself out there. And so, that's what I would tell people is get involved, email people. I mean, email random people that you think are involved in racing and see if they respond. Our friend of the podcast, Grant Lagrange, that's exactly what he did. He and I got to talking last year, and I think I was able to give him some halfway decent advice. And that's a role that I'm happy to perform when I can. Obviously, time is sometimes limited, but take a shot. If you've got specific questions, I'm happy to talk to people via email or via Twitter. Two fairly well-worn paths to racing industry success that are obvious, but I think need to be mentioned in this conversation. The University of Arizona industry program, so many people I've met attended that. And also my friends, and this was the way that I got into racing personally, through the Saratoga Special. Now, granted, back in the day, Saratoga Special, they clearly hired me. They'd hire anybody to come on board and help out. These days, it's a lot more competitive. There are a lot more people, but still, if you, I would check out the This Is Horse Racing website and email those characters with some familiarity with their work and what they're about, and you'll see people across the industry, from Gabby Gaudet, myself, Brian Nato, John Panagot, the racing manager. There's so many people who've done time at the Saratoga Special and gone on to write about racing on a part-time or full-time basis. Frank Scottoni, another one I'd be remiss not to mention. So who's another good example, Pete? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just a good example is just an example for someone to understand. Our friend Billy Blake, who worked for the Saratoga Special, also just literally sent me a message, or someone a message. We said hello to each other at the NHC. That following spring, we were hanging out in the Eddie Logan because he was in town for the tournament. He met Aaron Veracruzzi, and now he works for XpressBet TV, whatever, XBTV. And he got a job and flew out there, and now he works there.
Billy's a fantastic example, and somebody who definitely deepened his connections through tournament play and events. It is one of the things that's special about big contest events. It's an opportunity to meet a lot of people, and I would say 95% of them are really nice. That ratio is about right, JK?
100%. I mean, I've said a lot of times, there's only like two people in this sport that I really don't like that much. And it's not even
that on a future show.
It's not even hate. It's just I don't really like them that much. Everybody else
on this phone call, Jonathan.
No, everyone on the phone call is safe.
Just want to make sure I was okay. I give you a hard time sometimes.
Yeah, if this is a reality, show, you guys would get roses. So don't worry. It's a couple other people that would be fine.
And I think Billy's a perfect example. Sorry, Pete. I was just going to say Billy's a perfect example of what I was saying, too. It's because his background was in TV. He worked at a local TV station, but he was very interested in horse racing, and he was a handicapper. And he was able to parlay that. Look, we need video people in the industry. How many video people know horse racing? If that's what you do and you know horse racing, it's a huge edge over those, that are applying against you.
Absolutely. All right, that is all the time we have for today. I want to thank Mike Hogan. I want to thank Jonathon Kinchen. I want to thank our crew there in the DRF studio for helping us out, bringing the show to you via all these channels like Facebook Live and Spreaker. We are going to be back on Friday at 11. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. Thank everybody for listening. May you win all your photos.